Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The coffee mug shattered before I realized I'd knocked it off the counter. That's when I knew something was wrong. Not just clumsy wrong or tired wrong, but fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. The porcelain exploded against my kitchen floor in slow motion, each piece spinning through the air like tiny white butterflies. And I stood there, my hand still reaching for where the mug had been 3 seconds ago. 3 seconds. That's all it takes to destroy a life. If you're still listening, if you haven't scrolled away yet, I need you to understand something. This isn't about being slow or having bad reflexes. This is about what happens when your mind falls out of sync with reality. When every thought, every reaction, every desperate attempt to catch up leaves you further behind. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm about to tell you the most disturbing thing that's ever happened to me. Something that started in my apartment in downtown Seattle last Tuesday morning and hasn't stopped since. But before I begin, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you really paid attention to the gap between thinking and doing, between seeing and understanding? Because once you notice it, once you really notice it, you can never go back. The story starts now. Tuesday morning began like any other. My alarm buzzed at 6:47 a.m., that specific time because I'd read somewhere that waking up at non-standard times tricks your brain into being more alert. The October rain drummed against my 20th floor windows, creating rivers that distorted the Space Needle into something alien and wrong. I remember thinking the coffee maker sounded different. Not broken different. Just off. Like someone had changed the pitch of its gurgling by half a note. But I was already running late for my job at the tech startup downtown, so I ignored it. That was my first mistake. The mug, my favorite one with the faded Microsoft logo from my internship, sat exactly where I'd left it the night before. I reached for it while scrolling through emails on my phone. Normal Tuesday stuff, except my hand closed on empty air. I looked up. The mug was 3 inches to the left. Weird, I muttered, adjusting my reach. This time I got it. But something felt wrong about the weight. Like my brain expected it to be empty when it was actually full. Or full when it was empty. I couldn't tell which. The coffee tasted like memory. Not like coffee that reminded me of something, but like the actual taste was arriving late. First came the expectation of bitterness, then the heat, then finally, 3 heartbeats later, the actual flavor. I should have called in sick right then. Should have gone back to bed and hidden under the covers like I did when I was 7 and convinced something lived in my closet. But I had a presentation at 9. The quarter was ending. My manager, Derek, had already warned me about taking too many personal days. So I got dressed, fumbling with buttons that seemed to move between the moment I looked at them and the moment my fingers arrived. I blamed it on the lack of sleep, on the stress, on anything except what was actually happening. The walk to the bus stop took 17 minutes instead of the usual 12. Not because I was walking slower, but because I kept trying to open doors that my hand hadn't reached yet. Stepping off curbs my feet weren't ready for, flinching at car horns that had already faded by the time the sound registered. The woman at the bus stop, elderly, wearing one of those clear rain bonnets, kept glancing at me. I tried to smile, but by the time the expression reached my face, she'd already looked away. When I finally managed to make eye contact, she gathered her purse closer and shuffled to the far end of the shelter. "You okay, hun?" she asked, but her voice came from where she'd been standing, not where she stood now. The word "fine" died in my throat. because I'd already heard my response, already watched her nod and turn away, already seen the bus arriving, 3 seconds before it actually did. The ride downtown became a nightmare of predetermined moments. I reached for the rail before the bus lurched, moved aside for passengers before they stood up, heard my stop announced in echo, first in my mind, then through the speakers. By the time I stumbled into the office, the delay had stretched. No longer a heartbeat or two, but a full 3 seconds. 3 seconds between thought and reality, between intention and action, between cause and effect. "Marcus!" Derek's voice hit me from 2 directions, where he was and where he'd been. "Conference room, now!" I followed, trying to look normal, trying to walk in straight lines and respond to greetings that felt like déjà vu in reverse. My co-workers' faces blurred past. Sarah from accounting, Jin from development, that new intern whose name I could never remember. Their words reached me in waves. "Morning, Marcus. Heard about the Wilson account. Coffee's fresh if you..." Each phrase arriving after I'd already passed. After I'd already nodded, after I'd already pretended everything was fine. The presentation dissolved into chaos. My slides appeared before I clicked them. My words echoed back at me from 3 seconds in the future. I watched Derek's face fall in slow motion, disappointment spreading like spilled ink across his features. "Are you drunk?" The question came from everywhere and nowhere. "No, But I'd already answered. Already seen myself stammer through excuses. Already watched him stand up and gesture toward the door. "Go home, Marcus. Sleep it off. We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow, the word felt like a threat, like a promise of something worse. I made it back to my apartment somehow, muscle memory navigating while my conscious mind struggled to process a world running 3 seconds ahead. Or was I 3 seconds behind? The distinction blurred like rain on glass. That's when I saw the note. Taped to my door in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Stop fighting it. The lag will only get worse." I reached for it, and my fingers closed on nothing. Because the note wouldn't be there for another 3 seconds. Because nothing was where or when it should be. I stood in my hallway, key in hand, waiting for my door to catch up to my intention to open it. Waiting for my life to sync back up. Waiting for those 3 seconds to collapse back into zero. They never did. That night, I tried to map the delay. I sat at my kitchen table with the stopwatch app, pressing the button over and over. Click. Wait. See the numbers change. 3.2 seconds. 3.1, 3.3, never exact, but always close enough to drive me insane. Sleep came in fragments. I'd drift off, then jolt awake convinced I was suffocating, only to realize I hadn't taken the breath yet that my lungs thought they needed. My dreams ran on different timelines, past, present, and future colliding like cars on black ice. Wednesday morning brought a decision. Adapt or lose my mind. I started small, set my alarm for 3 seconds later than when I wanted to wake up, reached for objects before I could see them clearly, began sentences before the person finished asking their question. It worked, sort of, like learning to walk again after an accident. Functional, but wrong. The coffee shop barista, a guy named Tyler with gauges and a neck tattoo, squinted at me when I handed him exact change before he'd finished ringing up my order. "You psychic or something?" He laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Something like that," I managed, already turning away from where he would be standing when he responded. The world became a dance of prediction and compensation. I discovered I could function if I stopped thinking and let my body operate on pure instinct. The moment I tried to analyze what was happening, everything fell apart. but the note bothered me. Someone knew. Someone had experienced this before, or caused it. I called in sick to work, the conversation with Derek playing out exactly as I'd heard it in my head 3 seconds before it happened. His frustration, my apologies, the warning about my performance review, all predetermined, all inevitable. That afternoon, I went looking for answers. Started with Google, typing queries my fingers knew before my mind formed them. Temporal displacement symptoms, consciousness lag medical condition, time perception disorders, Seattle. Nothing useful. Just articles about jet lag and drug side effects and meditation retreats in Sedona. But on page 17 of the results, buried between conspiracy sites and medical journals, I found a forum post. Anyone else experiencing the 3-second delay? Started last month for me. Doctor thinks I'm crazy. Please respond. Catherine. The post was dated 3 days ago. 7 replies, all calling her crazy or suggesting she see a psychiatrist. Except for one. Check your mail. W. I tried to click on W's profile, but it had been deleted. Catherine hadn't posted again. My phone rang, or would ring, or had rung. The distinction blurred. Unknown number. I answered before it actually started vibrating. Hello, Marcus. The voice was female, older, tired. You found my post. Catherine. Was Catherine, before the lag took my name away too. She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. How long has it been for you? 2 days? Almost 3. Oh, honey, you're still in the easy part. Wait until it hits 10 seconds, 20. Wait until you're answering questions nobody's asked yet. Having conversations with people who haven't arrived. My throat went dry. It gets worse? Always, that's what he wants. What feeds him. Who? Who's doing this? The pause lasted forever, or had already happened. I couldn't tell anymore. The Watcher. That's what I called him before I saw his real face. He finds people like us. People whose minds run a little faster, a little different, and he adjusts us. Why? Because... Her voice fractured, like she was speaking from multiple moments at once. Because he experiences time backwards. Lives it in reverse. And he's so terribly lonely, Marcus, so desperate for someone who can meet him in the middle, who can exist in that space between was and will be. Static flooded the line, or silence, or screaming. All 3 at once, separated by heartbeats that hadn't happened yet. Catherine, find the blue door. The words came fast, urgent, already fading. Occidental Avenue, between the coffee shop and the line went dead before she could finish. Or after, or during. I grabbed my jacket and headed out into the Seattle drizzle. Occidental Avenue ran through Pioneer Square, the old part of downtown where buildings wore their history like scars. I knew the coffee shop she meant. Zeitgeist, with its exposed brick and pour-over snobbery. The walk took forever. Every crosswalk became a puzzle of when to step off the curb. Every passing stranger a potential collision as I tried to navigate where they would be versus where they were. By the time I reached Pioneer Square, the rain had soaked through my jacket, and the delay had stretched another half-second. 3.5 seconds now. The world felt like a badly dubbed movie. The blue door sat between Zeitgeist and a vacant storefront, so narrow I'd walked past it 100 times without noticing. No number, no handle, just peeling paint the color of deep water. I pressed my palm against it, and it swung inward before I made contact, or after. The sequence of events tangled like earphone cords in a pocket. Inside, stairs descended into darkness, not the absence of light, but the presence of something else. Something that ate photons and spat out temporal anomalies. My phone's flashlight bent at wrong angles, illuminating moments that had already passed. I descended anyway, because what else could I do? Go home and wait for the delay to stretch until I lived permanently in the past? Until every word I spoke answered questions from last week. The stairs ended at another door, this one red. A sign hung at eye level, but the words kept changing. Welcome, Marcus. Turn back now. You're already here. You never left. I reached for the handle and froze, because through the gap, beneath the door, I could see light. Not electric light. Not flame. But the cold glow of temporal displacement, of moments torn from their proper sequence and left to rot. And in that light, a shadow moved. Walking backwards. Always walking backwards. Waiting for someone who could finally keep pace. The door opened before I touched it. Inside, the room defied physics. Or maybe physics defied the room. Walls curved in directions that didn't exist. Furniture aged and renewed in the same breath. A grandfather clock in the corner ticked backwards, its hands spinning counterclockwise through moments that had already died. And in the center, sitting in a chair that existed in 17 different decades simultaneously, was the watcher. He looked normal. That was the horrible part. Just a man in his 50s wearing a cardigan and khakis like some suburban dad. Gray hair neatly parted. Hands folded in his lap. The only wrong thing was his eyes. They focused on where I had been, never where I was. "Marcus Chen," he said, and the words reached me before his lips moved. Age 28, software developer. Anxiety disorder diagnosed at 15. Prescribed Lexapro, but stopped taking it because it made you feel like a ghost. He smiled sadly. "You're already a ghost, Marcus. You just haven't realized it yet." I tried to speak, but my words tangled with their own echoes. The delay in the room was different. Not 3 seconds anymore. Not any consistent number. Time folded and refolded like origami made of moments. "Sit." He gestured to a chair I hadn't seen, or had always seen, or would see tomorrow. "We have so much to discuss. Or we already discussed it. Or we never will. Temporal grammar is tricky when you live backwards." I sat. The chair felt like memory foam made of yesterdays. "What are you?" The question finally escaped, though I heard my own voice asking it from 3 different moments. "Human, was human, will be human." He rubbed his temples like fighting off a migraine. "I was born running the wrong direction through time. Imagine it, Marcus. Watching everyone you love age in reverse, seeing them grow younger, smaller, until they disappear into non-existence. Knowing every conversation before it happens. Living every goodbye before the hello." The room shifted. Suddenly, we were in a living room. His living room, maybe. Photos on the mantel showed a family evolving backwards. A daughter graduating college, then high school, then middle school, then vanishing into pre-birth nothing. 40 years I lived like that. Alone. Unable to connect with anyone because our timelines never aligned. Until I discovered others like you. Minds that run a little ahead. Consciousness that processes reality before it happens. He leaned forward, and I smelled cologne that wouldn't be applied for 3 days. I learned I could adjust you. Slow you down. Create a delay that grows until we meet in the middle. The 3 seconds will become 4, then 5, then 10, then minutes, hours, days. Eventually, you'll experience next Tuesday while your body moves through this Thursday. And somewhere in that gap, we'll find each other. 2 minds moving in opposite directions, finally able to have a real conversation. My stomach churned, or would churn, or had already churned. "That's insane. Is it?" He stood, pacing backwards across the room. "You've felt it your whole life, haven't you? That sense of being out of step, of knowing things before they happen. Anxiety isn't a disorder, Marcus. It's evolution. Your brain trying to process a future it can almost touch. I want it to stop." "No." The word hit like ice water. "You want it to make sense. There's a difference. Right now, you're fighting the lag, trying to stay synchronized with a timeline that was never yours. But what if you embraced it? What if you let yourself drift?" The room shifted again. Now we stood in my apartment. But wrong. Furniture I didn't own. Plants that had died years ago thriving in windows that faced the wrong direction. "This is your home in 6 months," he explained, "after you've accepted what you are. See how peaceful it looks? How right. You can't fight time, Marcus. You can only choose which direction to swim." "Catherine," I started. "Ah, yes, Catherine Martinez. She made it to 15 seconds before the fear took her. Locked herself in a storage unit with a week of food and water, determined to wait it out." His expression grew distant. "I visited her yesterday. Or last year. Time makes pronouns complicated. She'll be fine. Or was fine. Or might have been fine if she'd listened. Where is she now? Now?" He laughed, but it sounded like crying in reverse. "There is no now for people like us. She exists in a bubble of last Thursday, experiencing the same day over and over because she refuses to let the delay grow. A self-imposed prison of temporal stasis." My phone buzzed. A text message that wouldn't arrive for 3 seconds. Then it did. "Get out. He's lying. K." The watcher saw it before I did. His face fell, or would fall, or had always been falling. She found a way to send messages forward. He sounded impressed and terrified. "Clever girl, too clever. That's why she had to be contained." More texts flooded in. "Don't trust him. The delay can be reversed. I found the cure. Marcus, please. The blue door was a trap." The room began to shake. Not earthquake shaking, but temporal tremors. Past and future colliding like tectonic plates made of moments. "You brought her here," the watcher snarled, moving towards me in reverse. "You created a paradox. She's reaching forward while I'm pulling you back, and now the whole system is—" The grandfather clock exploded. Not into pieces, but into times. Each gear becoming a different moment, spinning through the air like chrome butterflies. I felt the delay stretch. 4 seconds, 5, 6. "Run!" Catherine's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "The stairs! Now!" I ran. Or would run. Or had already run. My feet found stairs that existed in probability clouds, each step a quantum uncertainty of when and where. Behind me, the watcher screamed in languages that hadn't been invented yet. The blue door slammed shut as I tumbled through it, or before I tumbled through it, or because I would tumble through it tomorrow. I hit the Seattle pavement hard, rain soaking through my clothes that were already wet from rain that hadn't fallen yet. My phone rang. Catherine's number. "Marcus, can you hear me? When are you?" "I don't. Wednesday? Thursday? The delay is—" I checked my watch, but the numbers meant nothing. 7 seconds? 8? I can't tell anymore. "Listen carefully. I don't have much time, or rather, I have too much time in the wrong order. The Watcher isn't evil. He's desperate. Loneliness does terrible things to people who experience it in reverse. But he's wrong about the cure. You said you found it, the way to fix this. Not fix Navigate. The delay isn't a curse, Marcus. It's a gift. We're not falling behind, we're stepping outside, seeing the spaces between moments, the quantum foam where possibility lives. The rain fell upward for a second, then remembered which way was down. Meet me, she continued. Pike Place Market, the gum wall, midnight, or what passes for midnight when you're 8 seconds out of phase. I'll show you what I learned, what the Watcher doesn't want us to know. Catherine, trust me. Or don't. Or already have. Just be there. The line went dead. I stood on Occidental Avenue watching people navigate their linear lives. A couple argued about dinner plans. A businessman rushed to catch a bus. A child pointed at puddles that reflected moments that hadn't happened yet. Normal people living normal lives in normal time. I envied them and pitied them, and wasn't sure which feeling came first anymore. Pike Place Market at midnight felt like a mouth full of broken teeth. Empty stalls gaped in the darkness. Neon signs buzzed their dying light into puddles that reflected wrong. And the gum wall, that technicolor monument to human weirdness, seemed to pulse with its own temporal rhythm. I arrived 8 seconds early, or late. The distinction had dissolved completely. Catherine stood with her back to me, staring at the wall. But it wasn't the Catherine I expected. This one was older, grayer, wearing clothes that belonged to a decade I hadn't reached yet. You're wondering how long it's been for me, she said without turning. The answer is complicated. I've lived the past 3 months 17 times. Forward, backward, sideways. The Watcher's prison couldn't hold me once I understood the real nature of the delay. She faced me, and I gasped. Her eyes had the same quality as the Watcher's, focused on moments that existed outside the normal flow. He told you his sob story, didn't he? Born backwards. Cursed to watch everyone age in reverse. All true. But he left out the important part. She pulled something from her pocket. A device that looked like a smartphone had mated with a temporal anomaly. He wasn't born that way. He chose it. What? 20 years ago, Dr. William Hendricks was a quantum physicist at UW. Brilliant. Obsessed. Convinced he could crack the code of temporal consciousness. He succeeded, sort of, created a way to reverse his timeline. Thought he'd become unstuck in time, free to move through past and future at will. She laughed bitterly. Instead, he trapped himself in permanent reverse. And now he's trying to drag others down with him. Create a community of the temporally displaced so he won't be alone. The device in her hand flickered, showing readouts I couldn't understand. Numbers that existed in mathematical dimensions my brain couldn't process. But here's what he doesn't know, Catherine continued. The delay isn't one-directional. It's not just consciousness lagging behind reality. It's consciousness learning to exist outside reality. To see the spaces between seconds. To step through temporal doorways that normal perception can't detect. She pressed the device, and the world shifted. Suddenly, I could see everything. Not just the present moment, but the probability cloud of all possible moments. The gum wall existed in thousands of states simultaneously, fresh and clean, covered in wads, power-washed, rebuilt, demolished. Every potential future and past occupying the same space. This is what we really are, Catherine whispered. Not victims of temporal displacement, explorers of quantum possibility. The delay isn't pushing us out of time, it's pulling us above it. But the pain, the disconnection, I can't even have a normal conversation anymore. Because you're trying to stay anchored to a single timeline. Let go, Marcus. Stop fighting the current. Learn to swim between moments instead of drowning in them. She handed me the device. It felt warm, like holding solidified time. I built this using principles I pulled from futures that might not happen. It can stabilize the delay at any interval you choose. 3 seconds, 8 seconds, a full minute. Or, she paused, you can use it to step completely outside, become truly unstuck, move through time like walking through rooms. What's the catch? You can never fully return. Oh, you can visit linear time, interact with it, but you'll always be slightly out of phase, a ghost haunting your own life. And once you've seen how time really works, how flexible and fragile it is, you can't unsee it. Behind us, footsteps echoed on wet pavement. The watcher approached, walking backwards as always, but now I could see the quantum wake he left, ripples of reversed causality spreading from each step. Catherine. Marcus. His voice came from when he would speak, not when his lips moved. I should have known you'd find each other. The displaced always do. Hello, William, Catherine said calmly, still pretending this was an accident, still playing the victim. His face contorted with pain, or would contort, or had always been contorted. You don't understand. I've seen how it ends, how everything ends. When you live backwards, you know every death before every birth, every goodbye before every hello. I needed company, I finished. You needed someone else to understand. Yes? The word broke across multiple moments. Is that so wrong, to not want to be alone in the space between tick and talk? Catherine stepped forward, and I saw her move through 17 probable positions before settling on one. You had a choice, William. We all have choices. You chose isolation and tried to drag others into it, but there's another way. She held up a second device, identical to the one she'd given me. We can teach you how to navigate instead of drown, how to exist in quantum time without losing yourself. But you have to stop creating new victims, stop adjusting people without their consent. The Watcher. William stared at the device like a drowning man seeing a life preserver. You'd do that after what I've done? Because of what you've done, Catherine corrected. You've shown us what we are, what we can become. That's worth forgiveness, if you're willing to change. He reached for the device with hands that moved through yesterday and tomorrow simultaneously. And that's when I felt it. The moment of choice. Not just for him, but for me. I could use the device Catherine gave me, lock my delay at a manageable 3 seconds and try to return to normal life. Or step fully into the quantum stream and become something new, something that existed in the spaces between moments. I looked at the gum wall, at the thousands of colored wads representing thousands of moments of human weirdness, each one a choice someone made, a tiny rebellion against the ordinary. What did you choose? I asked Catherine. She smiled, and I saw her smile in 17 different timelines. I chose to explore, to map the territories between seconds, to find others like us and teach them they're not broken, just different, that the delay isn't a disease, it's evolution. And if I choose the safe option, lock it at 3 seconds and pretend this never happened, then you'll always wonder. Every time you see something, a heartbeat before it happens. Every moment of déjà vu. Every dream that feels like tomorrow's memory. You'll know there's a larger world out there, and you chose not to explore it. William activated his device. The quantum wake around him smoothed, stabilized. He still moved backwards through time, but now with purpose instead of panic. It's quieter, he whispered. The screaming of causality. It's finally quieter. I held my own device, felt its warmth, felt the potential futures radiating from it like heat from a star. Stay safe or step into the strange. Remain anchored or learn to fly. Behind us, Seattle hummed with linear life. cars following roads, people following schedules, time flowing in one direction like a river that had forgotten it could be an ocean. But between the seconds, in the quantum foam where possibility lived, a larger world waited. A world where consciousness could dance between moments, where past and future were just directions, not destinations, where people like us weren't broken, just built for a different kind of journey. I pressed the button. Reality exploded into probability. Time became a mansion with infinite rooms, and I had just found the keys. The delay stretched, not to any specific number, but to all numbers simultaneously. I existed 3 seconds behind and 5 seconds ahead, and exactly on time and completely outside time all at once. "Welcome," Catherine said from 17 different moments, "to the space between tick and talk. And that's my story, or will be my story, or was my story in a timeline that hasn't happened yet. If you're still listening, if you made it this far, then maybe you felt it too. That slight disconnect, that sense of being out of step with the world, that moment when you reach for something that isn't there yet, or answer a question nobody's asked. Maybe you're one of us. Maybe the delay is already starting, so subtle you blame it on tiredness or stress or too much caffeine. If so, remember this: you're not broken. You're not crazy. You're just learning to exist in the spaces between moments. And when the delay becomes too much, when you feel like you're drowning in temporal displacement, look for the blue door. We'll be waiting for you in the past, in the future, in the eternal quantum now where all possibilities exist at once. Time isn't a river, it's an ocean, and some of us were born to swim against the current. Sweet dreams, or nightmares, or whatever exists in the space between sleeping and waking. And if you notice your thoughts running 3 seconds behind tomorrow, don't fight it, embrace it. The water's strange here, but the view is incredible. If this story kept you up, or helped you sleep, or made you question the gap between thought and action, let me know in the comments. Share your own experiences with temporal weirdness. Like and subscribe if you want more journeys into the spaces between moments. And remember, time isn't just a dimension, it's a choice. Until next time, whenever that is. Story number 2. The thing about living alone is, you notice when things aren't where you left them. Last Tuesday, I found my running shoes in the kitchen. Not by the door where I always kick them off. Not in my bedroom. But right there on the cold linoleum, facing the window, like they'd been watching the sunrise. I stood there for a good minute, coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, trying to remember if I'd had too much wine the night before. But no, I'd been sober, working late on spreadsheets, boring stuff. The kind of night where you fall asleep in your clothes and wake up with keyboard marks on your face. So, why were my Nike Air Max 270s sitting in my kitchen like they belonged there? If you're listening to this right now, probably tucked under your covers, maybe with just a nightlight on, I need you to do something for me. Look at your shoes. Are they exactly where you left them? Are you sure? Because mine weren't. And that was just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. But fair warning, after this one, you might start sleeping with your shoes under your pillow. Trust me, I do now. And now, the story begins. My name's Jake Morrison, and I've lived in this 2-bedroom ranch house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for 3 years. It's nothing fancy. Built in 1907, beige siding. The kind of place where the previous owners left behind a live, laugh, love sign that I keep meaning to take down but never do. The neighborhood's quiet. Too quiet sometimes. But that's what happens when you're the only person under 40 on the entire block. That Tuesday morning, with the shoes in the kitchen, I convinced myself I'd sleepwalked. It happens, right? Stress from work, too much screen time before bed. WebMD said it was normal. Everything's normal according to WebMD until it tells you you're dying. But then Wednesday happened. I came home from my job at the insurance company. Same routine as always. Keys on the hook, jacket on the chair, shoes by the door. I heated up leftover Chinese food, orange chicken from Lucky Dragon, and settled in to watch the Lakers game. Fourth quarter. LeBron's about to make a three-pointer, and I hear it. Thump. Just one. From upstairs. I muted the TV, waited. Nothing. Old house, I told myself. Settling. Wood expanding and contracting. Physics, science. Rational explanations. LeBron made the shot, Lakers won. I went to bed, Thursday morning. I couldn't find my work shoes, the brown leather ones from DSW that I'd bought on sale last month. Searched everywhere. Under the bed, in the closet, even checked the car. 20 minutes late to work because of those stupid shoes. Found them that evening, in the bathtub, laces tied in perfect bows, positioned heel to toe like someone had been practicing walking. That's when I started taking pictures. Friday, 6:47 a.m. Black sneakers in hallway, pointing toward my bedroom. Friday, 11:23 p.m. Same sneakers now in living room, facing the TV. Saturday, 2:15 a.m. Woke up to use the bathroom. Work boots on kitchen counter. Took photo with flash. Hands shaking so bad it came out blurry. Saturday, 8 o'clock a.m. All shoes back in closet. Arranged by color. I don't arrange by color. I don't arrange anything. You know that feeling when you're a kid and you're certain, absolutely certain, there's something under your bed? That primitive fear that makes you jump from the doorway to your mattress so nothing can grab your ankles. I'm 32 years old, and I started doing that again. I called my sister in Des Moines. "Maybe you have a gas leak," Sarah said, her voice tinny through my phone speaker. I could hear her kids in the background. Normal life. Normal sounds. Carbon monoxide can make you do weird things. I bought a detector, I told her. It's fine. Everything's fine. Then maybe you need to talk to someone. Dr. Brenner helped me after my divorce. I'm not crazy, Sarah. I didn't say you were, but she was thinking it. I could tell. That careful tone people use when they think you're fragile. Like you're a cracked egg they're trying not to drop. I hung up and stared at my shoes. All 7 pairs lined up by the door like soldiers. Watching them felt ridiculous. Not watching them felt dangerous. That night, I tried something new. I traced around each shoe with masking tape. Little crime scene outlines on my hardwood floor. If they moved, I'd know exactly how far. Woke up at 3:33 a.m. to footsteps. Not upstairs this time. Right outside my bedroom door. Slow, deliberate. The unmistakable sound of rubber soles on wood. Step, pause, step, pause. Like someone learning to walk. Or something. I held my breath, counted to 100, then 200. The walking stopped at 217. When sunrise finally came, every single shoe had moved. Not far, just an inch or two outside their tape outlines. But the thing that made my blood run cold? They'd all moved in the same direction, toward my bedroom. I didn't go to work Monday. Called in sick. Wasn't really a lie. I felt sick. That kind of deep, bone-deep exhaustion that comes from not trusting your own home. But before I left the house that morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I set up my laptop, downloaded some security camera software, positioned it to record the hallway. Had to know if I was losing my mind or if something was really happening. The battery would last maybe 6 hours. Long enough. I spent the day at the library, not reading, just being somewhere else, somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, kept giving me concerned looks. I probably looked rough. 3 days of barely sleeping will do that. "You okay, hun?" she asked when I was leaving. "Yeah, just research." "What kind of research?" I almost told her, almost said, I'm trying to figure out why my shoes walk around at night. But I just mumbled something about local history and left. Sitting in the library parking lot, I couldn't stop thinking about my grandfather. He'd lived alone the last 10 years of his life after Grandma passed. Used to tell us stories about her still being in the house. Said her slippers would be warm sometimes when he woke up, like she'd just taken them off. We thought it was dementia, loneliness playing tricks. But what if it wasn't? My phone buzzed. Work email. My boss asking about the Henderson report. Normal life trying to creep back in. I ignored it and drove to Home Depot instead. Bought motion sensors, door alarms, even those little bells people put on cat collars. If something was moving my shoes, I'd hear it coming. The teenager at checkout gave me a look. Having trouble with break-ins? Something like that. My mom swears by these, he said, scanning the bells. Says they keep the ghosts away. He laughed. I didn't. Got home at sunset. Sat in my car for 20 minutes before going in. The house looked normal, suburban, safe. The Mitchell family next door was having a barbecue. Smelled like hamburgers and normalcy. Mr. Mitchell waved. "Hey, Jake, want a burger?" "Thanks, but I'm good." "You sure? Laura made her potato salad." For a moment, I almost said yes. Almost walked over there and pretended everything was fine. Ate potato salad and talked about the weather and forgot about the shoes. But then I saw it. In my living room window, just for a second, a shadow, child-sized, moving away from the glass as I looked up. "Rain check," I told Mr. Mitchell. When I finally went inside, every shoe I owned was in the living room, arranged in a perfect circle. In the center, a pair I didn't recognize. Red canvas high tops, kids size, maybe size 4. I don't have kids. Never had kids visit. These shoes, they were old, worn. The kind of wear that comes from years of use. The left one had a small tear near the toe, fixed with silver duct tape. The laces were frayed at the ends. They smelled like, how do I describe it? Like childhood. That mix of playground dirt and grass stains and something else. Something sweet. Like those strawberry fruit snacks from the 90s. I picked them up and found a note underneath. My handwriting. But I didn't write it. They remember. My hands shook as I read it again. The letters were perfectly formed, my exact style. Even the way I curved my Y's. But I didn't write it. I threw the shoes across the room. They hit the wall with a soft thud and landed perfectly upright, like they'd caught themselves. The laptop. I suddenly remembered the laptop recording upstairs. I ran to check it, and froze in the doorway. It was off, unplugged. The cord wrapped neatly around it, 3 times. The way my mom taught me to wrap cords when I was a kid. 3 times, Jake. Always 3 times so they don't tangle. I hadn't told anyone about that. Never mentioned it. But something in this house knew. That's when I started searching the house's history. Property records, old newspapers, online forums, anything. The Maplewood Public Library had archives going back to the 1960s. Spent hours there Tuesday morning. Microfilm making me dizzy. Looking for any mention of 1847 Sycamore Street. Found the original building permit. 1987. Builder was Tom Harrison. Nothing unusual there. House was sold new to the Marsh family. Robert, Linda, and their son. Found it in a 94 article from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. 7-year-old Timothy Marsh, previous owner's son, died in this house. The article was vague about how, just said tragic accident, and survived by parents Robert and Linda. But there was a photo. School picture day. Timothy grinning at the camera, missing front tooth, wearing a Batman t-shirt. and red high tops, the same ones in my living room. I made copies of everything. The librarian, different one today, older man with thick glasses, watched me pile up papers. "Researching the Marsh boy?" he asked, quietly. I looked up, startled. "You knew him?" "Taught second grade back then. Timothy was in my class." He adjusted his glasses. "Good kid, always early to school. Said he liked to get there before the other kids. Enjoyed the quiet. Used to arrange all the shoes in the cubby area. Said it was his job." His job? The man nodded slowly. Every morning had to be just right, toes pointing out, ready to run if needed. He was very particular about emergency preparedness for a 7-year-old. Always checking exits. Always making sure everyone knew where their shoes were. "Why?" I asked, though part of me already knew. His baby sister died when he was 5, SIDS. He was the one who found her in the morning. After that, he became obsessed with making sure everyone could get out quickly if something bad happened, especially at night. My chest felt tight. The article didn't mention a sister. Sarah would have been 2. The family didn't talk about it much, too painful. But Timothy, he carried that weight. Thought if he'd been faster that morning, worn better shoes, could have run for help sooner. The old man trailed off, lost in memory. I found Linda Marsh on Facebook that afternoon. Still lived in Iowa, Waterloo now. Her profile picture was her with grandkids, happy. Moved on. But in her photos from the 90s, there he was, Timothy. Red high tops in every picture. I messaged her, tried to be subtle. Said I lived in her old house, wondered if she had any history to share. She responded within an hour. "That house holds memories. Some better left alone. If you're smart, you'll move. If you're not, well. Just remember that Timothy was always particular about his shoes. Had to line them up just right, every night before bed. Said it helped him find his way in the dark." I asked her what happened to him. She typed for a long time. I could see the dots appearing and disappearing. Finally, October 15th, 1994. Carbon monoxide leak. Old furnace. The detector we had was faulty. Battery looked fine but wasn't working. Timothy tried to get out. We found him in the hallway. He'd made it halfway to our room before. He was wearing those red shoes. Always slept in them after Sarah died. Said he needed to be ready. Another message came through. I still have nightmares about his shoes. The way they were positioned when we found him. Pointing toward our door. Like even at the end, he was trying to wake us up. Trying to save us. Then, if weird things happen in that house, let them. He's not trying to scare you. He's still trying to save people. That's who he was. That's who he is. She didn't respond after that. That night, I couldn't face the house. Slept in my car in the library parking lot. Woke up every hour to check my shoes were still on my feet. But here's the thing about fear. It's exhausting. You can only stay terrified for so long before your body gives up. Before you need answers more than you need safety. Wednesday morning came too soon. My back ached from sleeping in the driver's seat. My breath fogged the windows. October in Iowa isn't kind to car sleepers. Mr. Mitchell was getting his newspaper when I finally dragged myself out. He did a double take. "Jake, everything okay?" "Fine," I lied. "Just fell asleep working on something." He didn't look convinced, but didn't push. That's the thing about Midwest neighbors. They care, but they respect boundaries. I had to go back inside eventually. Needed clothes. Needed to shower. Needed to decide if I was crazy or if a dead 7-year-old was really moving my shoes around. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Except the red high tops were gone. And in their place, lined up perfectly by the front door, were all my shoes. each pair positioned with military precision, toes out, ready to run. On the kitchen counter, I found my carbon monoxide detector. The one from my bedroom, opened up, battery removed, next to it, a fresh battery still in its package. The old battery had corrosion on the terminals. Could have failed any day. My hands shook as I installed the new battery. The detector chirped once. Good battery. Good connection. Safe. That's when I understood what Linda meant. He wasn't haunting this house, he was protecting it. I spent the next 3 days researching everything I could about carbon monoxide, about SIDS, about children who die young and the marks they leave behind. Found forums, support groups, other people with similar stories, houses where toys move, where blankets get tucked around sleeping children, where shoes, yes, shoes, appear in strategic locations. One woman in Phoenix wrote, "My daughter's rain boots keep showing up by the door when storms are coming. She's been gone 12 years, still looking out for her baby brother." A man in Portland. Son died in a house fire. Now I find my shoes by the window every night. The escape route he never got to use. And from right here in Cedar Rapids, live near Sycamore Street. Sometimes see a little boy in my yard at night, always checking our basement windows, like he's making sure they open. Lost my own son to carbon monoxide in '08. Would have been worse if the windows hadn't been unlocked. Still don't know how they got that way. Thursday night, I decided to try something. I left a pair of my shoes in Timothy's old room. Found out which one from the house's original listing. Small bedroom at the end of the hall. I'd been using it for storage. Also left a note. "Thank you for checking the detector. I'll keep fresh batteries in all of them, promise." Went to bed, actually slept. Deep, dreamless sleep. Woke up to find every shoe I owned arranged in a path from my bed to the nearest exit. The work boots pointed toward the window, a secondary escape route. The running shoes faced the bedroom door. The dress shoes were positioned by the smoke detector in the hall. And the note I'd left? Someone had written underneath in crayon. Shaky, childish letters. Check them monthly. Sarah didn't have shoes on. Couldn't run fast. You need good shoes to run fast. I sat on my bedroom floor and cried, not from fear, from understanding. This 7-year-old boy had died trying to save his parents, had spent almost 30 years making sure no one else died the same way. That afternoon, I went to Walmart. Bought every carbon monoxide detector they had. Spent the weekend installing them for all my neighbors, the Mitchells, Mrs. Patterson across the street, the new couple 3 houses down. "What's gotten into you?" Mrs. Patterson asked as I mounted one in her hallway. "Just being neighborly." She patted my cheek. "You're a good boy, Jake." As I was leaving, she called out, "Oh, and tell that little friend of yours he can stop checking my windows. I've seen him out there at night. I keep them unlocked now." My blood chilled. "You've seen him?" "Red shoes are hard to miss, dear. He's very polite. Always waves." That night, I had a dream. Not a nightmare, just a dream. Timothy was sitting on my couch. Looked exactly like his school photo. Gap-toothed grin, Batman shirt, red shoes swinging as they dangled off the cushions. "You fixed them all," he said. "The detectors? Yeah. Good, that's good." He picked at a loose thread on his shoe. "I couldn't fix ours. Dad was supposed to. He kept forgetting. I reminded him every day. It wasn't your fault. I know that now, but I didn't then. And after, I just wanted to make sure. How long have you been checking?" He shrugged, small shoulders moving under the cartoon Batman. "Time's different when you're like me. Feels like yesterday, feels like forever." Your mom misses you." "I know. I check on her sometimes. Make sure her shoes are good for the ice. She fell once. After that, I started arranging them better." We sat in comfortable silence. Then he asked, "Are you scared of me?" I was, not anymore. "Good. Being scared is okay sometimes. It keeps you safe. But not of me. I'm the safety check." I woke up as the first light crept through my windows. My shoes were all in their proper place, except for one pair of red high tops by the door. Size 4. The duct tape on the toe was fresh. The laces were new. I understood. He needed new ones. The old ones had walked too many miles, checked too many houses, saved too many lives. I ordered a pair online that day, best ones I could find. When they arrived, I left them by his door with a note. "For Timothy, keep up the good work." They were gone the next morning. But I found something in return, a child's drawing, crayon on construction paper, stick figures of a family, all wearing shoes, all safe. At the bottom, in purple crayon, "Thank you for understanding, T." That was 6 months ago. I still live here. Still find my shoes moved sometimes, but it's different now. Comforting. Like having the world's most dedicated security system. Sometimes I leave notes, updates about the neighborhood, who needs checking on, who just had a baby, who lives alone. He always responds. Usually in crayon, sometimes in my handwriting, which is still creepy, but I'm used to it. Last month I found all my shoes in the kitchen again, but this time there was a reason. The gas line to my stove had developed a small leak. So small I hadn't noticed, but Timothy had. I fixed it immediately, left him new laces as a thank you. My sister visited last week, still thinks I need therapy. "Your shoes are all over the place," she complained, nearly tripping over a pair in the hallway. "They're supposed to be there." "Why?" "Safety reasons." She rolled her eyes. But that night, her shoes joined the formation. Perfectly aligned. Toes pointing toward the exit. "Did you move my shoes?" she asked the next morning. "Nope." "Then who?" "Someone who cares about your safety. She left them there." Even Sarah knows better than to argue with good intentions. The neighbors have gotten used to it too. Sometimes I'll see Mr. Mitchell checking his shoes in the morning, nodding approvingly at their arrangement. Mrs. Patterson leaves cookies out on October 15th. Says they're always gone by morning. The new family that moved in last month. Their 5-year-old daughter told them about the shoe friend on their first night. Said he showed her the best way out of her room. Twice, just to make sure she remembered. Her parents were freaked out until I explained. Now they leave nightlights on. Makes it easier for him to work, because that's what it is. Work. A job he assigned himself at 7 years old and never gave up. Check the shoes. Check the exits. Check the detectors. Keep everyone safe. Some ghosts haunt. Some ghosts heal. And some just want to make sure you make it to morning. I've started volunteering with the fire department, teaching home safety, proper escape routes, the importance of good footwear, and always working detectors. Chief Rodriguez asked me once what got me so passionate about it. Lost a friend to carbon monoxide, I said. It wasn't exactly a lie. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's still around, still helping. The chief gave me an odd look but didn't press. Last week was the anniversary. 30 years since Timothy died. I expected, I don't know, something big. Some massive supernatural event. Instead, I woke up to find a single pair of shoes by my bed, my most comfortable ones, the ones with the best grip, and a note. Thanks for not being scared anymore. Thanks for helping. Sarah would have liked you. T. P.S. Check Mrs. Patterson's furnace. Sounds funny. I checked. The furnace was one service away from a catastrophic failure. Fixed now. Mrs. Patterson is safe. Another winter, another save. That's my life now. I'm the guy who checks on things, who maintains detectors, who makes sure shoes are in the right place, who carries on the work of a 7-year-old boy who refuses to let anyone else die on his watch. It's not the life I expected, but it's the life that found me, in a beige house, on Sycamore Street, where the shoes walk at night, and that's exactly how it should be. So, if you're still listening, still tucked in your bed, look at your shoes one more time. Are they exactly where you left them? Or have they moved just a little, just enough to point you toward safety? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's your imagination. Or maybe, just maybe, something's watching out for you. One step at a time. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to check your carbon monoxide detector. Timothy insists. If this story kept you up, or helped you sleep, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment about your own unexplained experiences. Have your shoes ever moved on their own? Do you have a guardian you can't explain? I read every comment, usually at 3 a.m. when the footsteps start. And remember, some hauntings aren't meant to harm. Some just want to make sure you wake up tomorrow. Until next time, this is Jake, and I'll be sleeping with my shoes in the hallway. They prefer it that way. Story number 3. Picture this. You're standing in front of your apartment building in downtown Chicago, counting the floors. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, wasn't there a 5th floor yesterday? Your neighbor Sarah lived up there. You remember helping her carry groceries just last week. But now, the building just ends, like someone took a giant eraser and rubbed out the top floor completely. No debris, no construction, just gone. If you're thinking this sounds impossible, trust me, I thought the same thing. Until it happened to me. Before you scroll away, I need you to hear this. Because what happened in my building, it might be happening in yours too. And once it starts, there's no stopping it. The story begins now. My name is Marcus. I moved to Chicago 3 years ago for a job at a tech startup. You know, the usual millennial dream. Found this decent apartment building on North Halsted Street. Nothing fancy, just a regular 5-story brick building from the 1920s. The kind with those old radiators that clang in the winter and windows that stick when it rains. I lived on the 3rd floor. Apartment 3B. Had this neighbor below me, Mrs. Chen, who always complained about my footsteps. Above me was this guy Jake who played guitar at weird hours. And above him, Sarah and her daughter Emma on the 5th floor. It started on a Tuesday, October 15th. I remember because I'd just gotten my coffee from the bodega downstairs when I noticed Jake standing outside, staring up at the building with his mouth hanging open. "Yo, Marcus," he said, not taking his eyes off the building. "Where's the 5th floor?" I laughed, thought he was messing with me. Jake was always the joker type. But when I looked up, the building ended at the 4th floor. Just stopped. Like it had always been a 4-story building. The roofline was perfect. No jagged edges, no exposed beams, even the cornices, those decorative stone pieces. They were all there. Complete. Finished. "This is some kind of prank, right?" I said. But my coffee was shaking in my hand. Jake shook his head slowly. "Sarah's apartment, it's just gone." We ran inside, took the stairs 2 at a time. The stairwell that used to continue up past the 4th floor. Now it just ended at a wall. A perfectly normal wall with peeling paint and everything. Like it had been there for decades. I touched it. Solid, cold, real. "Sarah!" Jake was pounding on the wall. "Emma, can you hear us?" Nothing. We called 911. What else could we do? The operator, she sounded confused, asked us to repeat the address. When we did, she said, "Sir, our records show that's a 4-story building." "No, it's 5 stories," I practically shouted. "A woman and her daughter live on the 5th floor." There was a pause. Then, "Sir, there is no 5th floor at that address. There never has been." My phone slipped from my hand. The cops came anyway. 2 officers who looked at us like we were crazy. They checked their database. According to every city record, our building had always been 4 stories. The blueprints at City Hall? 4 stories. Property tax records? 4 stories. Even, and this is what really messed with my head, even the photos on the real estate website where I'd found my apartment 3 years ago now showed 4 stories. But I remembered, I knew Sarah. I'd helped her fix her leaky faucet just 2 weeks ago. Emma had shown me her Halloween costume. She was going to be Wonder Woman. The other tenants, they remembered too. Mrs. Chen downstairs. Tom from 2A. Even our landlord, Mr. Petrov. We all remembered the 5th floor, but according to the rest of the world, it had never existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at my ceiling, wondering if Sarah and Emma were somehow up there, trapped in some space between spaces. Every little creak made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard something that made my blood freeze. Footsteps. Above me, in Jake's apartment. But they weren't Jake's footsteps. Too light, too quick, like a child running, like Emma. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fear. We filed missing person reports for Sarah and Emma. But how do you report someone missing from an apartment that supposedly never existed? The police had no records of them, no social security numbers, no school enrollment for Emma. Nothing. But we had proof. Photos on our phones. Sarah at Jake's birthday party. Emma trick-or-treating last year. Except, when we looked at those photos now, Sarah and Emma were gone. Just empty spaces where they used to be. In the birthday party photo, Jake was raising a toast to empty air. In the Halloween picture, I was handing candy to no one. Only our memories remained. Mr. Petrov called a tenant meeting that Friday. We gathered in his first-floor apartment, all 12 of us who lived in the building. His hands were shaking as he poured coffee. "My friends," he said in his thick Russian accent, "I have lived in this country 40 years. I have seen strange things. But this," he shook his head, "this is something else." "What do we do?" asked Mrs. Chen. "What if it happens again?" Tom from 2A laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Happens again? Come on, buildings don't just lose floors." That's when Jake spoke up. "I've been measuring." We all turned to look at him. "The building," he continued, "I've been measuring it from the outside. Yesterday it was 60 feet tall. Today," he paused, "today it's 58. The room went silent. 2 feet, whispered Mrs. Chen. "It's shrinking 2 feet a day." "That's impossible," Tom said, but his voice cracked. Jake pulled out his phone, showed us photos he'd taken with measurements. He was right. The building was getting shorter, not dramatically, just slightly, like someone was slowly pushing it down into the earth. At that rate, I did the math quickly, we lose another floor in 7 days. 1 week. We had 1 week before the 4th floor disappeared. That night, I started packing. Just the essentials. But where could I go? My lease wasn't up until January. I couldn't afford to break it and pay for a new place. Plus, what if I was wrong? What if we were all just having some kind of shared delusion? But then I heard it again. The footsteps above me. And this time, I heard something else. A voice, faint, like it was coming through water. Help us. I pressed my ear to the ceiling. Sarah, is that you? The voice came again, weaker. Can't breathe, getting smaller. I grabbed a broom and started banging on the ceiling. Hold on, we'll get you out. But Jake's door flew open. He stormed down to my apartment. What are you doing? I heard them, I said. Sarah and Emma, they're trapped up there. Jake's face went pale. Marcus, I heard them too, but they weren't coming from above. He pointed to his floor. They were coming from below. That's when we realized. The 5th floor hadn't disappeared. It had been compressed, pushed down into the space between the 4th and 3rd floors. Sarah and Emma were trapped in a space that was getting smaller every day. We tried everything. Crowbars, sledgehammers. Jake even borrowed a concrete saw from his construction job. But nothing worked. The moment we'd make a hole, it would seal itself. Like the building was healing. Like it was alive. Mr. Petrov found something in the basement. Old newspapers from when the building was constructed in 1923. The headlines made our skin crawl. Construction halted after 5th worker vanishes. Architect claims building hungry for souls. City condemns 5-story building, demands reduction to 4 floors. But the building had been 5 stories when we all moved in. How was that possible? Tom had a theory. What if it's like a cycle? The building grows to 5 stories, attracts tenants, then feeds on the top floor. Then it starts over. Feeds? Mrs. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. Look at the dates on these newspapers, Tom continued. 1923. Then I found more incidents, 1943, 1963, 1983, 2003, every 20 years. I did the math. 2023. This year. Every 20 years it takes a floor, Jake said. And everyone forgets, everyone except the people living here. We had 4 days left. By Monday, the panic had fully set in. Half the tenants had already fled. Mrs. Chen moved in with her sister in Evanston. Tom just vanished, left all his stuff and disappeared. But some of us stayed. We had nowhere else to go. Or we couldn't leave Sarah and Emma behind. Jake and I spent every night trying to break through to them. The voices were getting weaker. Sometimes we'd hear crying. Sometimes nothing at all. The space between floors was compressing more each day. I measured the height of my ceiling. It had dropped 3 inches since Friday. Mr. Petrov was the one who found the architect's journal, hidden in a wall during renovation 20 years ago. But he'd forgotten about it until now. The building made people forget things, important things. The journal belonged to Henry Blackwood, the original architect. His entries started normal, talking about his vision for a modern apartment building. But as construction progressed, they got stranger. The workers speak of voices in the walls. Nonsense, of course. Though I must admit, I hear them too at times. We've lost another man, simply vanished while working on the 5th floor. The police suspect foul play, but I know better. The building took him. I understand now. The land is cursed. No, not cursed. Hungry. It requires sacrifice, 1 floor every 20 years, 1 set of souls to feed upon. I've made a bargain. The building will stand 4 stories tall, but every 20 years it will grow to 5. It will attract tenants to the top floor, and then it will feast. In exchange, the other floors remain safe. This is the only way. Jake threw the journal across the room. He knew. That psycho knew, and he built it anyway. But why didn't anyone stop him? I asked. Mr. Petrov's face was grim. Because people forget. The building makes them forget. Only those living here during the feeding. Only we remember. Tuesday came. 3 days left. The building was now 54 feet tall. Jake's ceiling was visibly lower. He'd started sleeping on my couch, said he could feel the weight pressing down on him at night. That's when we heard the knocking. It came from inside the walls, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone tapping out a code. Jake grabbed his phone, started recording. "That's Morse code." We listened, translated. The message made our hearts stop. Not just one floor this time. Hungrier. Need more. The building wasn't going to stop at the 4th floor. It wanted more. Wednesday. 2 days left. The 3rd floor, my floor, was starting to compress. My ceiling was now a full foot lower. I had to duck to get through my doorway. The windows were beginning to warp, the glass bending inward like something was pressing against it from outside. We made a decision. We couldn't save Sarah and Emma, but we could try to warn others. Jake set up a camera, started live streaming. "If you're watching this," he said, "stay away from 4258 North Halsted. The building is..." The stream cut out. The camera died. Every electronic device in the building stopped working simultaneously. That's when the walls started talking, not voices, words, appearing in the paint like bruises, messages that faded as quickly as they appeared. 20 years too long. Hungry now. All floors mine. You cannot leave. We ran for the exits, but the doors wouldn't open. The windows were sealed. We were trapped. Thursday, 1 day left. The building was 48 feet tall. Jake's apartment was gone, compressed into a space 6 inches high. He'd moved in with me, but my apartment wasn't much better. We had to crawl to get around. The walls were closing in, literally. Mr. Petrov was the last to give up hope. "There must be way," he kept saying. "Blackwood's journal. There must be clue." But Blackwood's journal ended with one final entry. "I have made a terrible mistake. The hunger grows with each feeding. 20 years will become 10, then 5, then 1, and then it will consume everything. I tried to destroy my creation, but it's too late. The building has a will of its own now. May God forgive me." The footsteps above us had stopped. Sarah and Emma's voices had gone silent yesterday. I didn't want to think about what that meant. As I write this, it's Thursday night. Halloween. How fitting. The building is now 46 feet tall. By tomorrow, the 3rd floor will be gone, and us with it. Jake is beside me. We're recording everything on paper, hoping someone will find this. Someone who might remember, someone who might warn others. The walls are so close now. I can touch both sides of my apartment by stretching out my arms. The ceiling presses down on us. We've stopped trying to escape. There is no escape. But I need you to know something. This isn't just about our building. In Blackwood's journal, he mentioned others, other architects who made similar bargains, other buildings that feed. Maybe you've noticed it in your own building, a floor that seems smaller than it should be, voices in the walls, neighbors who vanish and are forgotten, time distortions, electronic failures, or maybe you've counted the floors from outside, and the number doesn't match what's inside. These buildings are everywhere, waiting, feeding, growing hungrier, and once they start taking floors, they don't stop. It's 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes until Friday, until the 3rd floor gets compressed. But wait, I need to tell you about the photographs. The ones I found hidden in Mr. Petrov's apartment after he disappeared. See, Mr. Petrov had lived through this before, 20 years ago. He was a younger man then, had a family, a wife named Anya, 2 kids. They lived on the 2nd floor. The photographs showed the building from 2003, 5 stories tall, just like ours had been, but in the background of one photo, barely visible, was another building, the one across the street, 4261 North Halsted. and it was only 3 stories tall. But I knew that building. I walked past it every day. It was 5 stories. Or it had been 5 stories. Until I looked at it that Thursday afternoon. 3 stories. Just like in the old photo, they were synchronized. The buildings, when one fed, another grew. Like a system. Like lungs breathing in and out, compress and expand. Mr. Petrov had written on the back of one photo, "The pattern spreads, block by block, building by building. Chicago is infected. The foundations talk to each other. They share the feast." I should have run then, but I couldn't leave Jake. Jake is unconscious. The pressure got to him an hour ago. I can barely breathe. The ceiling is 3 feet high now. The walls are sweating. Or maybe that's me. Hard to tell anymore. I found something in the last pages of Blackwood's journal. Pages I couldn't see before, like they only appear when you're about to be taken. He wrote about a way to break the cycle. But it requires a sacrifice. Someone has to stay behind, to hold the building's hunger at bay, to feed it willingly instead of letting it take. I think about Sarah and Emma, about all the people who have vanished over the decades, compressed into nothing, forgotten by everyone except those who were here to witness it. I won't let that happen to Jake. The pen is shaking in my hand. The walls are inches away now, but I need to finish this. Need someone to know. I can hear them now. All of them. Every soul the building has taken. They're not gone, they're here. In the spaces between spaces. Compressed, but not destroyed. Waiting. The building doesn't digest its food. It collects it. 11:56 p.m. If you find this journal, if you remember us, tell our story. Watch your own building. Count the floors. Trust your memories even when the world tells you you're wrong. And if your building starts to shrink, run. Don't try to save anyone. Don't try to understand. Just run. 11:59 p.m. I can see it now. The truth. The buildings aren't separate. They're connected. A network, a root system beneath every major city. Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo. All of them. Feeding, growing, preparing for something bigger. The compression isn't destruction, it's storage. They're collecting us for something. Something that happens when enough souls have been gathered, when enough buildings have fed. Midnight. The ceiling touches my face. Jake is gone, pulled into the wall, but I can hear him. He's with Sarah and Emma now. They're calling for me. I understand now. We're not food, we're seeds, and something is about to grow. If you're still listening, still reading, check your building. Count the floors. From inside, then from outside. If the numbers don't match, it's already too late. The building has you now, just like it has me. But before you go, before you run to check your windows and count your floors, let me tell you what happened to the others. The ones who escaped, or thought they did. Mrs. Chen called me last week, a week after she moved to her sister's place in Evanston. Her voice was shaking. "Marcus," she said, "my sister's building. It had 6 floors when I arrived. Now it has 5. The infection spreads. When someone flees a feeding building, they carry something with them. A spore, a signal, a hunger. They contaminate the next building they enter. Tom, remember Tom from 2A? He texted Jake before our phones died. He'd driven all the way to Milwaukee, checked into a motel. 2 stories. Safe, right? Wrong. By morning, it was 3 stories. By evening, 4. The motel guests started noticing their rooms were smaller. The hallways were longer. The elevator that hadn't existed before was now there, waiting, humming with electricity that came from nowhere. You can't run from this. You can only delay it. And the children, God, the children see it first. They always do. I found Emma's drawings in the trash last month. Pictures of our building. But in every drawing it had different numbers of floors. 6, 7, 10. One showed it stretching all the way to the clouds. Windows like eyes. Doors like mouths. Feeding. She knew. Somehow, she knew what was coming. Kids always know. There's something else. Something I discovered in the compression. When the walls are closing in and reality gets thin, you can see through to the other buildings. All of them, the whole network. Thousands of them across the country. Breathing together. Compressing together. And in the spaces between, in the compressed floors, we're all connected. Sarah whispers to someone in Detroit. Jake talks to a woman in Portland who vanished in 1983. The network isn't just buildings, it's us, the compressed souls. We're the nervous system of something vast, something that's been growing under America's cities for a century. Blackwood didn't make a bargain with the land. He made a bargain with something that was already here, something that's been here since before the cities. Since before the first foundation was poured. It taught him how to build, how to create structures that could feed it, how to hide in plain sight. Every major city, every apartment building over 3 stories, they're all potential feeders. Dormant until activated. And once one starts, it triggers others, like dominoes, like a virus, like what's happening right now. You think this is just a story? Think again. Google building height discrepancy Chicago. See how many results come up. How many people asking why their building seems shorter. Why floors are missing. Why their apartments feel smaller. The posts disappear within hours. The building scrubs them. But for a moment, people notice. We all notice. We just forget. Or we're made to forget, or we're compressed before we can tell anyone. But you'll remember this story, even when the building tries to make you forget. Because I'm not just telling it, I'm embedding it in your mind, in your dreams, every time you walk into an elevator and count the buttons, every time you climb stairs and lose count, every time your ceiling creaks at night. You'll remember, and you'll check. And one day, you'll notice something's wrong. That's when you'll know it started. Your building's turn, your feeding cycle, your compression. But by then, it'll be too late. Just like it's too late for me. Wait, how are you reading this? This journal was compressed with me, unless you're in a building too. A building that's starting to shrink. And you found this because the walls wanted you to. Because it wants you to know what's coming. Because fear makes the feeding sweeter. But there's something else. Something I haven't told you yet. The real reason I'm able to write this. To reach you, even from inside the compressed space. It's because I'm not the first. In the walls, in the compressed spaces, there are others. Hundreds of them, all writing, all warning. All trying to reach someone. Anyone, before it's too late. We exist in the margins, in the spaces between floors, in the moments between seconds. We can sometimes push through, leave messages, like bruises on reality. Have you ever found a note in your apartment that you didn't write? A message scrawled on a mirror that appears when the room steams up. Words typed on your computer while you slept. That's us, the compressed, the collected, trying to warn you. But the building learns. It adapts. It makes our warnings seem like dreams, like stories, like fiction. Nobody believes fiction, right? Nobody checks their ceiling height because of a scary story they heard online. Except you will. Because deep down, you already know something's wrong with your building. You've felt it. That sense of unease when you're alone in the hallway. The way the elevator sometimes opens to floors that shouldn't exist. The maintenance door that wasn't there yesterday. The way your apartment key sometimes doesn't fit quite right. Like the lock has shifted slightly. Those aren't accidents. Those aren't your imagination. That's the building. tasting you, testing you, deciding if you're ready to be compressed. Check your ceiling. Is it lower than yesterday? Check your windows. Are they harder to open? Check your doors. Do they stick when they didn't before? How many floors does your building have? How many did it have last week? Can you remember? Or is it already making you forget? Listen. Do you hear footsteps above you? In an apartment that shouldn't exist? Voices in the walls? Your neighbors acting strange? It's starting. Your building is waking up. And once it starts feeding, count your floors. Every day. Write it down. Take pictures. Don't let it make you forget. And whatever you do, don't live on the top floor. Because the top floor always goes first. Always. But here's the thing they don't tell you. What I learned too late. The building doesn't just take floors from the top. Sometimes, when it's extra hungry, it takes them from the bottom too. Pulls them down into the earth, into the foundation, into the network below. So really, nowhere is safe. The building will feed, one way or another. And we're all just waiting our turn. Sweet dreams. If you can still sleep after this, and if you hear footsteps above you tonight, or below you, or in the walls, don't investigate, just run, while you still can. Because once the building marks you, once it decides you're next, there's no escape. Trust me. I'm proof, or I was, before I became just another voice in the walls, another forgotten soul, another seed waiting to grow. The building has me now. And if you're not careful, it'll have you too. So, still think your building is safe? Still trust those floors you count every day? I need to know. Comment below. Tell me how many floors your building has. Then count them tomorrow and the day after. Let me know if the number changes. And if you hear voices in your walls tonight. If you notice your ceiling seems lower. If your neighbors start disappearing. Subscribe, because you'll want to know what happens next. You'll need to know what happens when the buildings have collected enough of us. What grows from seeds of compressed souls. What's really underneath our cities, and why they're all waking up this year. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. And remember, count your floors every single day before it's too late, like it was for me. Story number 4. The sock was wrong. I held it up to the dim basement light, turning it over in my hands. Navy blue with tiny anchors. Definitely not mine. My apartment complex in downtown Denver had a shared laundry room, sure, but I'd been the only one down here for the past hour. The machines on either side of mine sat empty, their doors hanging open like mouths mid-yawn. I glanced at my phone. 2:47 a.m. Nobody else would be doing laundry at this ungodly hour on a Tuesday. That was precisely why I chose this time. To avoid the crowds, the small talk, the awkward dance of waiting for machines. But here was this sock. Small, child-sized maybe, and I lived alone. Before we dive into what happened next, if you're listening to this late at night, maybe doing your own laundry, you might want to check your load, count your clothes, make sure nothing extra has appeared, because once you notice it happening, well, let's just say some things can't be unnoticed. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories that'll make you think twice about everyday things. Now, let me tell you how it all started. 3 weeks earlier, I'd moved into the Riverside Gardens apartment complex. The name was a joke. There was no river, and the only garden was a patch of dead grass by the dumpsters. But the rent was cheap, and after my divorce, cheap was all I could afford. The laundry room was in the basement, accessed through a narrow stairwell that always smelled like mildew and something else. Something sweet and cloying that I could never quite identify. 5 washing machines lined one wall, 5 dryers faced them. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one always flickering like it was sending out some kind of Morse code. I'd established my routine quickly. Tuesday nights, or technically Wednesday mornings, At 2:30 a.m., set my alarm, stumble downstairs with my basket, get everything done while the rest of the building slept. No fighting over machines. No one stealing your dryer before you could transfer your clothes. Perfect. The first time it happened, I barely noticed. I'd thrown in my usual load: work shirts, jeans, underwear, socks. Added the detergent, inserted my quarters with that satisfying chunk-chunk sound, and settled onto the wooden bench with my phone. 37 minutes later, I transferred everything to the dryer. It wasn't until I was folding clothes back in my apartment that I found it. A single white undershirt, size medium. I wore large. Must have been stuck in the machine from someone else's load, I muttered to myself, tossing it into my donate pile. These things happened in shared laundry rooms. Mystery socks, random underwear, the occasional pillowcase that definitely wasn't yours. Part of apartment living. The second week, things got stranger. Same routine, same machine. Number 3, my favorite because it seemed to clean better than the others. Same 2:30 a.m. time slot. But when I opened the washer, sitting right on top of my wet clothes was a dress. A yellow sundress with tiny daisies printed on it. Size small. The kind of thing my ex-wife might have worn, but she'd taken all her clothes when she left. I held it up, water dripping onto the concrete floor. The fabric felt wrong somehow. Newer than new. Like it had never been worn, never been washed, never existed until this moment. I looked around the empty laundry room. The security camera in the corner had been broken since I moved in, its lens covered in dust and cobwebs. The other machine sat silent and dark. "Hello?" My voice echoed off the cinder block walls. "Anyone there?" Nothing. Just the distant hum of the building's boiler and that ever-present flickering of the dying fluorescent bulb. I left the dress on top of the machine and finished my laundry. When I came back the next week, it was gone. But that's when I found the sock, the navy blue one with the anchors. And that's when I started to pay attention. I began documenting everything. Week 3, a pair of men's boxer briefs, size XXXL, black with red trim. The waistband still had the store tag attached. Week 4, 3 kitchen towels, mint green with embroidered roosters. They smelled like vanilla extract and something medicinal. Week 5, a child's t-shirt with a faded image of some cartoon I didn't recognize. Size 6. There was a dark stain near the collar that wouldn't come out no matter how many times I washed it. Each item appeared in the same way, sitting on top of my clothes when I opened the washer. Always different. Never anything I'd seen before. And here's the thing that really got under my skin. They were always damp. Not soaking wet like they'd been through the wash cycle with my stuff, but damp. Like they'd been sitting in a humid room, like they'd been somewhere else. And then suddenly they were here. I tried everything to figure it out. I counted my clothes before putting them in. 23 items. Counted them coming out, 24. Always one extra. I tried different machines, but it only happened with number 3. I even tried coming at different times, but the laundry room was packed during normal hours, and I needed my sleep for work, so I stuck with my routine. 2:30 a.m., machine number 3, and each week, something new would appear. By the 6th week, I'd started taking photos. Not of the items themselves, something about that felt wrong, invasive, but of the serial numbers on the machine, the placement of the items, timestamps on my phone. I created a spreadsheet, tracking patterns. Was there a connection between the items? A common thread? The child's shirt bothered me the most. Kids' clothes always do, don't they? There's something inherently vulnerable about them. This one was obviously well-loved before whatever happened. The fabric was soft from countless washes, the kind of softness that only comes from a mother's careful attention. I found myself touching that dark stain obsessively. It was brown now, oxidized, but I could tell it had once been red. The location, right at the collar, suggested something had dripped down from above. I didn't want to think about what. That's when I decided to do some real detective work. I started hanging around the building during different hours, casual-like, checking mailboxes for names I didn't recognize, striking up conversations with neighbors I'd never spoken to before. Most people were happy to gossip about the building's history. That's how I met Frank from 2A. Frank had lived here for 8 years, longer than almost anyone else. He remembered things. Remembered people who'd come and gone. When I mentioned the laundry room, his expression changed. "You don't use the basement, do you?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Sometimes, late at night when it's quiet." Frank looked around the lobby, making sure we were alone. "How late?" "Around 2:30 usually." His face went pale. "Jesus, kid, that's when she used to do hers." "She?" "The girl from 5C. Your apartment. Sarah something. Millfield? Millbrook? Sweet kid, kept to herself. Always doing laundry in the middle of the night. Said she worked weird hours, but..." He shrugged. "Seemed more like she was avoiding people, you know?" I mentioned it to my neighbor once, Mrs. Chen from 4B. She was doing her laundry on a Saturday afternoon, and I'd come down to check if Machine 3 looked different somehow during daylight hours. "You ever notice anything weird about that machine?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked at me over her glasses, then at Machine 3, then back at me. "That one? Oh, honey, nobody uses that one." "What? Why not?" She leaned in closer, lowering her voice even though we were alone. "The last tenant in your apartment, 5C, right? She used that machine exclusively, sweet girl kept to herself. But then one day..." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Well, she just disappeared. Left all her things behind. Rent paid up for 3 months in advance. The landlord had to clean everything out." My mouth went dry. "When was this?" "Oh, about 6 months ago, maybe 7. Right before they renovated your unit." She loaded her clothes into machine number 1, far away from number 3. "I stick to this side of the room now. Call me superstitious, but..." She shrugged and fed quarters into the slot. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Mrs. Chen had said. The previous tenant disappeared. Used Machine 3 exclusively. I looked up old news articles, police reports, anything I could find. Nothing. It was like she'd never existed at all. The landlord claimed no knowledge of any previous tenant when I asked. Said the apartment had been vacant for over a year before I moved in. Someone was lying. But I couldn't figure out who or why. But Frank's information gave me a starting point. Sarah Millbrook. I found her online easily enough. Social media leaves quite a trail. Her Facebook page was a shrine to normalcy. Photos of coffee cups, sunsets, her cat. The kind of carefully curated life that suggested someone trying very hard to appear okay. Her last post was from 7 months ago. A picture of a tabby cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight. The caption read, "Mr. Whiskers found his forever home. Sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them." The comments were telling. Friends expressing concern. "Haven't seen you around lately. Everything okay? Your mom called me looking for you. Sarah, please call someone back." Then, gradually, the messages stopped. Her birthday came and went without the usual flood of well wishes. Her friends moved on, as people do. Life continued without Sarah Millbrook. But here I was, living in her apartment using her washing machine. And the machine was still expecting her. I started visiting other laundromats around the city, casual-like, just observing, looking for patterns. What I found made my blood run cold. At the Suds & Go on Colfax, the owner mentioned Machine 4 was temperamental. People complained about finding extra items in their loads. He'd had it serviced 3 times, but the repair guys could never find anything wrong. The 24-hour wash palace on Federal had a similar story. Machine 7. Always Machine 7. The overnight attendant, a tired-looking woman named Rosa, told me people avoided it after midnight. "Weird things happen," she said, not looking up from her magazine. "People find clothes that aren't theirs, sometimes valuable things, wedding rings sewn into shirt pockets, photos tucked into jeans, like the machine's trying to tell them something." "What do you think it's trying to tell them?" Rosa finally looked up, her dark eyes serious. "That someone's still waiting for their laundry to be done." The next Tuesday at 2:30 a.m., I stood in front of Machine 3 with my laundry basket, hesitating. The smart thing would be to use a different machine, to break the pattern, to stop whatever this was before it went any further. But I had to know. I loaded my clothes, counting each item as it went in. 23 pieces, added detergent, inserted quarters. The machine rumbled to life with that familiar chunk-chunk whir sound. And then I waited. This time, I paid attention to everything. The way the fluorescent light flickered in a rhythm that seemed almost intentional. The sweet smell that grew stronger as the wash cycle progressed. The way the temperature in the room seemed to drop degree by degree. At 2:45, I heard something new. A soft tapping sound, like fingers drumming on glass. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from inside Machine 3. The rhythm was irregular, desperate, like someone trying to communicate. I pressed my ear against the machine's lid. The sound was clearer now, not random tapping. It was Morse code, ... SOS, over and over again. SOS, SOS, SOS. Someone was trapped inside the machine. Not physically, that was impossible. But somehow, some way, someone was in there, asking for help. I grabbed my phone and started recording. The tapping continued for another minute, then stopped abruptly as the wash cycle ended. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. 37 minutes had never felt longer. I sat on that wooden bench, checking my phone every few minutes. 2:31, 2:35, 2:42. The laundry room felt smaller somehow, like the walls were slowly closing in. That sweet, cloying smell seemed stronger tonight, like overripe fruit mixed with copper pennies. At 2:58, I heard footsteps in the stairwell. My heart jumped. In 3 months of Tuesday night laundry, I'd never encountered another person down here. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Not the rushed stumble of someone carrying a heavy basket. More like browsing, window shopping. The door creaked open. Nobody entered. I could see the stairwell through the open doorway. Empty. The footsteps had stopped, but the door remained open, cool air from the hallway mixing with the humid warmth of the laundry room. "Hello?" My voice cracked. The washing machine's timer buzzed, making me jump. Cycle complete. I stood up, legs shaky, and approached Machine 3. Through the circular glass door, I could see my clothes, but there was something else. Something pale, pressed against the glass from inside. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. The metal was ice cold, painful to touch. I yanked the door open. A white cotton nightgown fell out, landing at my feet with a wet slap. But that wasn't what made me stumble backward. Inside the machine, mixed in with my clothes, were dozens of items. Socks, underwear, shirts, dresses, pants, all different sizes, different styles. Children's clothes mixed with adult clothes. Modern items tangled with things that looked decades old. And everything was damp, clinging together like they'd been compressed in some tight, airless space. I reached in, pulling out item after item. My work shirts were there, twisted around strangers' belongings. A baby's onesie wrapped around my jeans. A man's tie knotted through the sleeves of a woman's cardigan. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A wallet, brown leather, worn smooth with age. Inside, a driver's license. The photo showed a young woman with kind eyes and a shy smile. The name, Sarah Millbrook. The address, Apartment 5C, Riverside Gardens. The same apartment I lived in now. Behind the license were other cards. Library card. Coffee shop punch card with 2 holes left. A small photo of a tabby cat. Normal things. The kinds of things someone would miss. The kinds of things someone would come back for. Unless they couldn't. As I held Sarah's wallet, something else caught my eye. Tucked behind her insurance card was a folded piece of paper. A handwritten note, the ink slightly smeared from moisture. If you're reading this, then you found my hiding place. I know this sounds crazy, but I had to leave some kind of record. Machine 3 isn't normal. It's been taking things. My things. Other people's things. I've been documenting everything, but I'm running out of time. My hands shook as I continued reading. It started with socks, just like it probably started for you. Then bigger things, personal things, things that mattered. I found a child's toy in my load once, a stuffed elephant named Peanut. The name was embroidered on the tag. I looked it up online. Peanut belonged to a little girl named Emma Rodriguez. She died in a drowning accident 6 months ago. I had to stop reading for a moment. The implications were too horrifying. The machine collects them. The belongings of the dead. Like it's trying to keep their memory alive. But it's not just keeping memories. It's keeping them, the people. I can hear them sometimes, late at night, crying, calling out. They're trapped in there, and they're not alone. The note continued on the back. I tried to break the machine, tried to report it. Nobody believes me. The landlord says I'm having a breakdown, says I need help. But I know what I've seen, what I've heard. Tonight, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to give the machine what it wants. Maybe if I go willingly, it will let the others go. The note was dated 7 months ago, the night Sarah disappeared. If you're reading this, it means my plan didn't work. The machine kept me too. I'm so sorry. I tried to warn people. I left the note in my wallet hoping someone would find it. Someone who could break the cycle. At the bottom, in different handwriting, shakier, more desperate, was a final message. Don't use the machine. Don't let it take you too. But if you do, remember that we're still here. We're still waiting. And maybe, if enough people know the truth, we can finally rest. The footsteps started again. This time inside the laundry room. I spun around, still nobody there. But wet footprints led from the doorway to machine 3. Fresh, glistening under the fluorescent lights. The footprints were small. Woman size 7, maybe 8. They stopped directly in front of me. Sarah? The name came out as a whisper. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. The overhead light flickered faster, creating a strobe effect that made everything look like it was moving in slow motion. And then I heard it. Soft at first, almost like the sound of the washing machine filling with water. But it wasn't water, it was crying. The sound came from inside machine 3. Muffled, distant, like someone calling from the bottom of a well. I leaned closer, my ear almost touching the still warm metal of the drum. Please. One word. Barely audible. But enough to send me running. No, not running, not yet. Because as I stood there, frozen with terror, I heard something else. More voices. Different ages, different genders, all speaking at once. A chorus of the lost. Help us. Don't leave. It hurts. I want to go home. Mommy? That last one, the child's voice, broke something inside me. Emma Rodriguez. The little girl with the stuffed elephant. She was in there too. I found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. I hear you. I know you're there. I'm going to help. The crying stopped. The voices fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then, from inside the machine, a single word: how. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By Thursday, I was a wreck. Called in sick to work, something I never did. Spent hours researching Sarah Millbrook online. Found her Facebook page. Hadn't been updated in 7 months. Her last post was about adopting a cat. The same tabby from the wallet photo. Her friends had left messages at first. "Hey, haven't heard from you. Hope everything's okay. Sarah, your mom is worried. Please call. Has anyone seen Sarah? This isn't like her." Then nothing, like everyone had just given up. I found one news article, small, buried in the local section. Woman missing from Riverside Gardens apartment complex. 2 paragraphs. No follow-up, no resolution. The article mentioned she was last seen doing laundry, but now I had Sarah's note, and her question echoing in my mind: how? I spent the next few days researching everything I could find about washing machine hauntings, supernatural appliances, anything that might explain what was happening. Most of it was garbage, urban legends and creepypasta stories. But buried in the noise, I found some disturbing patterns. A forum post from 3 years ago. My apartment's washing machine keeps adding clothes to my loads. Management says it's impossible, but I have pictures. A news article from Oregon. Mysterious deaths linked to laundromat equipment malfunction. 3 people had drowned in their apartments, found in bathtubs that should have been empty. All 3 had been regular late-night customers at the same 24-hour laundromat. A Reddit thread titled, "Anyone else having problems with Apex brand washing machines?" Dozens of comments describing similar experiences. Extra clothes appearing, voices from inside the machines, cold spots, the feeling of being watched. Apex. I ran back down to the basement to check. Sure enough, Machine 3 bore the Apex logo, a stylized triangle with waves inside it. I found the company's website. Apex Industrial Appliances had been founded in 1987 and went out of business in 2003. Their machines were known for innovative water circulation systems and revolutionary cleaning technology. The website had been archived, but I could still access old product manuals and safety recalls. And there it was, a recall notice from 2001. Certain Apex Series 3000 washing machines may experience water-level sensor malfunctions, resulting in potential overflow conditions. Units manufactured between January 1998 and March 2001 should be immediately discontinued. The recall mentioned 17 confirmed cases of catastrophic water system failure. 17 people had died when their Apex machines malfunctioned, drowning in their own laundry rooms. But here's the kicker. The recall was voluntary. Many apartment complexes and laundromats never received the notice. Or if they did, they ignored it. Replacing commercial washing machines was expensive. Machine 3 had a manufacturing date of February 1999. Tuesday came around again. I'd planned to skip it to break my routine. But at 2:15 a.m., I found myself awake, staring at the ceiling. My laundry basket sat in the corner, still empty from last week's abandoned load. I had to go back, had to get my clothes at least. And maybe return Sarah's wallet somehow, leave it where someone would find it. Do something. But as I stood at the top of the basement stairs, Sarah's question haunted me again. How? How do you help the dead? How do you free trapped souls from a washing machine? How do you solve a problem that shouldn't exist? I thought about Sarah's final plan. She'd tried to give the machine what it wanted, herself. It hadn't worked. She'd joined the others instead of freeing them. Maybe the machine didn't want sacrifice. Maybe it wanted something else. At 2:30 a.m., I stood at the top of the basement stairs. The sweet, cloying smell was overwhelming now, like flowers at a funeral, like decay, masked with perfume. The laundry room was exactly as I'd left it, my clothes still in Machine 3. The wet footprints had dried, leaving only faint outlines on the concrete. My basket sat on the bench, waiting. I approached Machine 3 slowly. The door hung open, my clothes visible inside, but they looked different now. Older, faded, like they'd been there for months instead of days. I reached in, pulling out a shirt. It disintegrated in my hands, fabric turning to dust. Everything inside was the same, rotted, ruined, gone, except for one thing. A new item sat at the bottom of the drum. Fresh, clean, neatly folded. A maintenance uniform. Blue coveralls with Riverside Gardens embroidered on the pocket. Size medium. There was a name tag attached. Mike. My blood went cold. That was the maintenance man. The one who'd shown me around when I first moved in. The one who'd recommended apartment 5C because it had just been renovated and was practically brand new. I heard the sound again. The crying from inside the machine. But now I understood it wasn't crying at all. It was water. Running water, like a sink left on. Like a tub overflowing. Like someone drowning. The truth hit me all at once. Mike hadn't just known about the machine's problem. He'd been covering it up. When tenants complained, he dismissed their concerns. When people went missing, he helped the landlord cover their tracks. He'd been feeding the machine victims for years, until it decided to feed on him. The maintenance uniform wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. The machine was trying to tell me that Mike had been its accomplice, and now he was trapped inside with all his victims. The lights went out. In the absolute darkness, I heard movement. Shuffling. Wet feet on concrete. Multiple sets now. All moving toward me. My phone flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating faces. Pale, bloated faces. Sarah Millbrook stood closest, still wearing her nightgown, water dripping from her hair. Behind her, others. An elderly man in boxer briefs. A child in a cartoon t-shirt. A woman in a yellow sundress, all the clothes, all the items. They hadn't appeared from nowhere. They were breadcrumbs. Clues. Pieces of the people who'd used Machine 3 and never left. And there, at the back of the group, was Mike, still wearing his maintenance uniform, his face twisted with guilt and terror. Sarah's mouth opened, water pouring out instead of words. She pointed at the machine. I understood. Machine 3 wasn't adding extra clothes. It was collecting them. Keeping trophies. Building a catalog of everyone who'd discovered its secret. And now it wanted to add my clothes to its collection. The maintenance uniform made sense now. Mike must have known, must have tried to fix it or shut it down, or something. And the machine had taken him too. The dead moved closer, herding me toward the Machine 3. Its door yawned open, drums spinning slowly, impossibly deep. Not 3 feet deep like a normal washer, deep like a tunnel, like a throat. I threw Sarah's wallet at her, hoping. I don't know what I was hoping. She caught it, looked at it sadly, then let it fall to the floor. They didn't want their things back. They wanted company. Machine 3's drum spun faster, creating a wind that pulled at my clothes. The sweet smell was overwhelming now, making me dizzy. I could see things in the darkness of the drum, glimpses of other places, other laundry rooms, other victims. This wasn't the only one. There were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, in apartment complexes and laundromats across the country. Washing machines that had become something else, something hungry. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran, but not for the stairs. I ran for Machine 1, fumbling for quarters in my pocket. Shoved them in, turned the dial to hot water, extra long cycle. Then Machine 2, then 4 and 5. All of them except 3 churning to life, filling the room with noise and steam. The dead paused, confused. They'd never seen anyone do this before. The machines synchronized somehow, their rhythms matching, building to something like a heartbeat. The whole room shook. Pipes groaned in the walls. Machine 3 screamed. It was a metal sound, like brakes grinding, like steel tearing. The other machines were drowning it out, overwhelming it. The dead flickered like bad TV reception, their forms wavering. As the cacophony reached its peak, I heard Sarah's voice one last time, clearer than ever. "Thank you." I saw my chance and took it. Up the stairs, into my apartment. Grabbed my keys, my phone, my jacket. Nothing else mattered. As I ran for my car, I heard it. The building's fire alarm blaring, water cascading down the stairwell. All 5 machines had overflowed, flooding the basement, shorting out the electrical system. I drove away and never looked back. The news called it a maintenance failure. Old pipes, they said, faulty machines. The basement flooded so badly they had to gut the entire laundry room. I heard they found things in the walls when they renovated. Bones, they whispered. Clothes from different decades. Bodies that had been there so long they'd become part of the foundation. They found Sarah Millbrook. And others. So many others. The building was condemned 6 months later. Too much damage, too many questions. The residents were relocated, the structure demolished. They built a parking lot where Riverside Gardens used to stand. I live across town now. A place with in-unit laundry. I pay extra for it, but it's worth it. I still can't look at a washing machine without checking the drum first. Still count my clothes obsessively. Still wake up at 2:30 a.m. sometimes, expecting to hear that chunk whir sound. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Last week, I was folding laundry in my new apartment. Everything accounted for. Everything mine. Except there was an extra sock, navy blue, with tiny anchors on it. The same one from that night. And it was still damp. So, let me ask you something, and be honest. Have you checked your laundry lately? Really checked it, counted every item? Because once they find you, once they mark you, distance doesn't matter. Location doesn't matter. They're patient. They've got all the time in the world. And Machine 3, they never found it. When they drained the basement, when they tore out all the other machines, the space where number 3 should have been was just a hole. A perfectly round hole that went down deeper than the building's foundation. Deeper than anyone was willing to measure. It's still out there. In some other basement. Some other building. Waiting. So, next time you do your laundry, especially late at night when you're alone, count your clothes. Count them going in. Count them coming out. And if there's something extra, don't touch it. Don't acknowledge it. And whatever you do, don't use machine number 3. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear what happened when I went back. Because I did go back, had to. That sock was just the beginning. They're still sending me things. Little reminders. Little invitations. And I think they're getting impatient. Sleep tight.